let me tell you a little bit about Bersin Associates and what we do. We are a research and advisory services firm focused on HR, talent, learning, and leadership. Our What Works membership helps you deliver business performance through proven people strategies. 500 leading organizations around the world rely on our What Works membership to drive business results. And we go beyond research. We provide trusted research-based content, including our models and frameworks that our members can use again and again to assess their organizations and to create, communicate, and implement the strategies that will impact their business. And we make it easy for you and your teams to find exactly what you need through Bersin Insights, our new personalized information platform designed specifically for HR, talent, and learning teams. Today's webinar is sponsored by EdAssist, a Bright Horizon Solutions at Work. EdAssist is revolutionizing the way organizations strategically and cost-effectively build a smarter, more loyal workforce through leveraging their tuition assistance programs. They are at the forefront of the education management industry, marked by best-in-class technology, the largest education network, and world-class educational advising. Through their unrivaled customer service and a steadfast commitment to maximizing the tuition assistance investment, they achieve a measurable ROI for their clients. In fact, EdAssist consistently saves their clients 15 to 20% of their total annual tuition spend. And after this webinar, be sure to visit their website, www.edassist.com, to find the recording of this webinar and more information. And now I'd like to formally begin today's webinar. And it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our speakers for today, Dr. Brenda Kowski, Senior Analyst here at Bersin Associates, and Mark Ward, Vice President and General Manager at EdAssist. And I will now turn the discussion over to Brenda.
Thank you, Wendy, and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on our webinar about tuition assistance programs. And we're going to talk today about best practices for maximizing a key talent investment. And Wendy, could we get to the first slide? Looks like we're having just a little bit of technical difficulties, folks. Thank you. So this presentation is really about talent, how to grow and support workforce development. And tuition assistance is a very powerful tool, and we're going to need all the tools we can get as leaders and organizations attempt to emerge from the recession growing at faster rates than their competitors. To the extent HR can supply the organization to meet this growth-related demand will fuel the organization's grab for market share, so it's pretty important. The health of business and industry and where we all are in the macroeconomic cycle sets the stage for our conversation about tuition assistance programs. Learning is going to be increasingly important in the future. Now, we've been in a period of recession, we all know this, where jobs are scarce and therefore employees stay where they are. The labor market was anemic, but relatively stable from an organizational perspective. We've also been in a period where we're forced to do more with less, as we all know. But as employees grow weary of the extra demands and hours, another shift occurs. Employees take action, looking for more favorable workplace conditions and expectations. Bersin Associates working all sorts of HR groups, expecting this rise in employee turnover. Coincidentally, productivity gains force organizations to add more staff. And so we're all familiar with, like I said, this workforce churn that results. According to the BLS data depicted here in the graph, both the quits rate, or voluntary turnover rate, and the hires rate are on a progressive march. Now, that's great news for the nation, and particularly for job seekers, but it's an unequivocal sign that the job market is healing, so it's great news. But to organization, it's going to present a challenge, and we all see it coming. Certainly one of training. Given these data, HR can expect turnover to rise, which means an influx of new hires, which is always a training concern. This issue represents a big impetus to shore up learning and development and align initiatives. We're going to need to sharpen every tool in the whole toolbox. Supporting business growth will continue to have a theme of strong talent at its core. Talent, specifically having enough of the right kind of talent, will continue to be a challenge as the economy recovers and as organizations innovate and attempt to grow their market share. Bersin research shows businesses have really started to respond to the economic recovery and overall business environment. In fact, right now we're in a time of executing strategy through mergers and acquisitions. We're expanding into new markets globally, and to marshal all of those efforts, we're bringing in new leaders. Organizations are aggressively pursuing major change. Yet as 35% of us accelerate growth and globalize, 51% are struggling to hire the right talent. And these data validate what we already know. Globalization is a formidable force of change for HR. Certain talent pools are hard to come by, and the BLS data tell us that workforce churn will ramp up in the days ahead. Now, that's a pretty tumultuous picture for HR and represents a call to action for any of us managing anything close to learning. So we've got the demand. We know we're going to have new employees in the short term and be dealing with the learning challenges that come with change and growth. And I haven't even mentioned the impending baby boomer retirement. So it's really time to seriously consider supply, and that's why we're all on the phone today. In some cases, we just need to source better or provide a more compelling employment package. And these are great tools, but many science, technology, nursing, and engineering positions are facing serious talent shortfalls. And just like a value chain, if we can control the supply of talent flowing into our organization, we can control a competitive asset. Partnering with post-secondary educational institutions like university and technical colleges secure this ready-made talent pool. Now, this is the ideal, but there are many ways to use tuition assistance. Once just considered a benefit, now really a competitive sourcing and talent development tool. So today we'll discuss the highlights of the Tuition Assistance Research Report. This is a sneak peek, and many of the graphics from that report are going to be featured here. And Mark's going to talk to you about the role of tuition assistance, and I'll come back and reveal our top 5 research findings and introduce the Bersin Associates maturity model for tuition assistance programs. Then Mark will come back and talk about tuition assistance best practices and case studies as applied to that model, and like Wendy said, we'll leave some time for Q&A at the end. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mark.
Thank you, Brenda, and I also like to thank everybody for joining us today. Before we further discuss the role of tuition assistance, I just want to touch on how Brenda and her team researched and analyzed and updated the previous report from 2009. The study methodology was a combination of qualitative interviews with HR or L&D executives, director level or above, along with a quantitative online survey which was sent to over 5,500 U.S. companies. Over 800 companies originally responded to the survey, which yielded around 300 qualified responses, which now we're going to share with you. So, most of us know what a tuition assistance program is. It is essentially where an employer pays for part or all of an employee's cost of extended learning. Some programs cover bachelor's and master's degrees, and others cover certificate programs or test preparation or non-degree programs. Some programs even cover student loan repayments. So now let's talk about what the research found. The vast majority of organizations, 71%, regardless of size or industry, currently offer tuition assistance to their employees. What is interesting about this is it is a decrease from 2009 study results, which we attribute to the recent economic downturn. Companies decided to cut back on this benefit. However, we don't really see this as a negative. If anything, the recession forced many of the executives we interviewed to say, hey, wait a minute, we are spending all this money on tuition assistance, but is it actually helping our company? This is an important shift from viewing tuition assistance programs as an entitlement to instead a key talent management tool. I'll chat later about some companies who recognize this issue, that is, examined their tuition assistance program and really had some innovative ideas to more strategically align and structure the tuition assistance program. As I mentioned earlier, the reach of tuition assistance has grown in recent years, and now they pay for a wide range of degree programs, certificate programs, and individual courses. According to the study, most employees are still pursuing master's or bachelor's degrees using their tuition assistance program, which is not a real surprise to anyone. What is more interesting is that we're seeing half of these organizations now covering professional certifications, individual courses, and certificate programs. That's an important recent distinction and something for other companies to consider. In a labor market that is becoming more highly specialized and technical, we see this type of education increasing in popularity, especially since they are less expensive, take less time to complete, but still allow an employee to develop additional expertise and skills. In the 2012 study, we asked participants to select the top 5 reasons their organizations offer tuition assistance. The most popular reason, as you can see above, was to increase retention. This has not always been the case. Recruitment used to be the #1 benefit to employers. The truth is that executives are looking at the millions they spend on tuition assistance and are now asking the question, how do I leverage this better? If I'm going to spend all this money, I want to make sure I'm leveraging it. And this is causing the shift that you see here. The tuition spend can have a significant impact on human capital objectives, talent mobility, and even help with developing our people. This is evidence of a significant new trend in how tuition assistance is being thought about. And from an employee's perspective, you'll see that their top 5 benefits all have a common theme. They see tuition assistance as providing a positive impact on their upward mobility, and they view it as a vehicle for producing other tangible career and performance benefits. We all know that by nurturing our employees, by building new skills, and learning to be better managers and leaders only improves companies as a whole and especially their results. Plus, think about it. There's a self-selection aspect at play here. The employees that are reaching out to participate in the tuition program are likely to be rising stars. They're ambitious, they're motivated, and they're committed. So now I'm going to pass it back to Brenda, and she's going to discuss the top 5 research findings from this report.
Thanks, Mark. For this study, as you mentioned, we talked to those professionals that were in charge of managing the tuition assistance program, and like you had said, it was a follow-up to our 2009 study. So these research findings are really about how tuition assistance is being used today and what some of those most compelling new practices were and new perspectives. So there are 5 findings which sum up the trends in tuition assistance programs. First of all, organizations are increasingly aligning tuition assistance with their talent management strategies. Secondly, contrary to popular belief, so kind of a myth busted here, the majority of employees who participate in the TAP do not leave their organization. So we'll talk more about that. And number 3, the number of U.S. companies offering tuition assistance to their employees has declined, as Mark just mentioned. And furthermore, the cost per participant has increased. And we actually see this is very much related to our first finding. So we'll talk about that. In our 5th finding, most companies report that they measure the value of their tuition assistance program. Now, these top 5 findings reflect a movement from an entitlement to a talent management tool. HR leaders have discovered that focusing on the use of this tool to fix specific workforce gaps yield important benefits for both the organization and the employee, the ones we just talked about. And since this tool is an ongoing cost, they also have realized that it needs to show value, as Mark was talking about. So let's talk about each of these findings in more detail. Number 1, we're finding that 86% of participating companies, of folks that participated in our research, have aligned tuition assistance with their talent management strategies. And that's up from 49% in 2009. That's a huge jump. It's like double. And we see this increase reflective, like Mark had mentioned, of the economic downturn. When money is tight, dollars are redirected only to those activities which add value to the organization. So program managers and stakeholders of the TAPs that survive have strengthened their alignment to strategy. These are all, on the left here, these are all the areas that they're saying, yes, this is aligned with comprehensive benefits, and it is aligned to our talent acquisition and recruitment strategy, et cetera. The second finding, many organizations think it's necessary to mandate a stay period, but this figure reports the number of organizations that have stay periods of various lengths. So the stay periods are usually, as we see here, about 1 to 2 years. But we found a myth busted. Most employees who receive tuition assistance stay on at the organization past any mandatory stay period the organization might have anyway. So why stay period, just as a reminder, we're really talking about the length of time employees need to stay after graduation to retain those tuition assistance dollars. So in fact, 71%, as you see here, of survey participants reported that the majority of TAP graduates stay with the company in the year following graduation or, if applicable, that stay period. In fact, of the companies that believe their TAP provides a high value to the organization, almost all, 92%, agree that their TAP participants are more likely to stay. So the bottom line is that a program that is considered to be of high value, not just an entitlement, is related to employees' choice to stay. Moving on to our third finding, like Mark mentioned earlier, we're seeing that 71% of U.S. organizations are offering tuition assistance. Now, as from 2009, this is an overall decrease, about 16% in offered programs, as well as an increase in the employers who have no plans at all to offer tuition assistance, and that's from 10% to 25%. So now why the change? Like we alluded to earlier, it is likely that the decrease is due to a reprioritization of investments, increasingly aligning them with business objectives. So to save costs, organizations may have reduced the pool of those eligible for tuition reimbursement. Likely this pool is composed of managers or advanced subject matter experts requiring graduate school education. Now that brings us to our next finding. Per participant expenditures have increased for all company sizes to just under $5,000 per participant. Now that's approximately a $1,200 increase from 2009, and this number is basically on track with the IRS limit of $5,250 per TAP participant. So there's a couple of reasons for this potential uptick in costs. As I alluded to in the previous slide, organizations may be targeting higher value employees for tuition assistance. Often these kinds of employees are more in need of graduate level education, which is more expensive, quite a bit more expensive actually. Again, this indicates that organizations are targeting certain talent for this kind of investment, even if the per person cost of that investment rises. To organizations, it's important enough to have great leaders, managers, and experts to warrant this increase in cost. Additionally, tuition itself has increased across the board, with students shouldering the burden of double-digit increases for several years running. In fact, costs have increased 4 times faster than the Consumer Price Index. Of course, college and universities' increases are going to impact TAP costs. Our fifth finding is around measuring the value of TAP programs. So 82% of organizations measure the value of their tuition assistance program, and that's an overall increase of 12% compared to our 2009 numbers. However, there is room for improvement in both the type and number of metrics collected and evaluated. Companies that evaluate their tuition assistance programs measure, on average, only 4 out of 10 distinct metrics. Now, those 4 are the most commonly measured metrics. These are the top of the figure here: retention rates, employee mobility, and employee performance. But evaluation efforts could be expanded to show all of the facets of value that tuition assistant programs have. Now, we've talked about the important findings from this research and reviewed the trends in tuition assistance. So now let's talk about the hallmarks of a mature and effective tuition assistance program. And I'd like to introduce here the Bersin Associates Tuition Assistance Maturity Model. It's really helpful. Our members actually love our maturity models because it describes the levels of sophistication of various programs or practices. So this is about the tuition assistance program. Let me go through it level by level as you consider where your own organization's program might fall. We'll start at the bottom here, level 1. We're talking about a program that has inconsistent standards, policies, and administration. Now, many organizations offer tuition assistance benefits at this level 1. And so a couple of symptoms here, so you can recognize this if this describes your organization. Funding for tuition often comes from a variety of sources. Sometimes tuition is reimbursed. Sometimes it's expensed and paid directly out of the departmental budget. Usually these expenditures are not tracked, or they're mixed with other expenses, so the real cost of the tuition assistance program isn't known. In addition, eligibility, caps, restrictions, approvals, all these policy issues can vary by department or among different employee groups. Generally, these policies are not clearly communicated or commonly understood. And these organizations' participation can be quite low. And here, tuition assistance is considered a benefit and treated as an expense to be managed. Now, to move from level 1, an organization must undertake an extensive enterprise-wide review of its program and standardize policies and practices. Centralizing the program can support standardization, and Mark will talk more about centralization in a bit here. But without a deliberate and consistent set of decision and approval points, it's pretty tough to manage a TAP or to budget it strategically. Now, we can move up to level 2, which is really about standardization and supporting employee development goals. An organization can be classified at the level 2 piece of the maturity model when management is proactively using tuition assistance as a tool for employee and leader learning and development in a standard way. So in these organizations, managers understand how an undergraduate or graduate degree program can help an employee meet individual development objectives. Participation generally remains employee-initiated, but there is usually management guidance in program selection, and approval is sometimes dependent on the relevance of the program to the employee's current and future work. So this program cost is viewed by executives as more of an investment in people because the results of the program should have an impact on business issues, should be aligned to the business. In these organizations, there are clearly defined programs. Both managers and executives understand their value. So then if we want to jump to level 3, this really involves aggregating employee development needs, both now and in the future, so that tuition assistance dollars support the organization's talent management strategies. Organizations at level 3 not only have a standardized enterprise-wide program that addresses level 1 inconsistencies and are consistently supporting employee development as in level 2, but they also have that talent management alignment. In addition to development, their programs are designed to support recruiting initiatives and to help maintain desired attrition and retention rates. In level 3 organizations, executives across different enterprise functions are aware of the ways in which TAP offers the company an advantage in the competition for talent, and therefore they support it. In these organizations, the TAP is measured against metrics that represent the company's strategic talent needs. Organizations at this level will likely see a positive impact of their program on these metrics. Now, moving up to level 4, you have kind of a qualitative shift. These organizations enter into strategic partnerships and alliances with schools for the purpose of developing and delivering custom degree programs. And these programs are aimed at specific employee audiences. They're custom designed to develop greater internal capability in identified skill areas. These programs are often taught at the organization's facility, actually, to provide greater employee convenience and promote higher levels of employee participation. These partnerships also allow for a variety of cost-saving measures, such as volume discounts and savings on development expenses. In level 4 organizations, the TAP is treated as a strategic tool to develop the workforce. This is really about controlling the supply, when I was doing the introduction, as I spoke about. These programs generate the greatest returns on investment, and they provide the highest strategic value. What distinguishes the most successful organizations operating at this level is their ability to measure the inputs and the outcomes of the programs and make continual adjustments and improvements over time in response to changing business conditions. Now, with that, I'm going to hand it back to Mark. He's going to discuss the best practices that support the advancement through this model.
Thank you, Brenda. So now that we've presented the tuition assistance maturity model, the next question is, how can you move your organization from where it is today up to the next level? Here we have our top 10 best practices for tuition assistance. Now, I'm not going to read through them all. You can certainly do that. Instead, we'd like to focus on 4 key best practices, 1, 3, 4, and 9, that we believe would be most relevant to you. We will discuss best practices based on actual case studies from companies interviewed for this study. So many tuition assistance managers that we interviewed stressed this first best practice, align tuition assistance with the organization's talent strategy. Now, if you remember, Brenda mentioned this under level 3 as one of the attributes under level 3 of the maturity model. Brenda and her team designated this best practice as the #1 best practice because it's so important. One company that really saw the benefits of aligning their tuition assistance with their talent strategy was Comcast. In the past, Comcast did not closely monitor their tuition assistance program, which made it very difficult to track cost and return on investment. And this is a very common issue with companies. The company was spending millions with minimal knowledge of whether this was actually helping them with their industry competitiveness, recruitment efforts, or overall employee satisfaction. To remedy this situation, Comcast is doing a number of interesting things. First, they more strongly link their tuition assistance policy with their learning and development group, as well as with their HR recruitment efforts and established programs for developing emergent leaders. And second, Comcast hired an external tuition assistance management provider that will help establish a measurement and tracking program that allows Comcast to better link tuition assistance benefits to specific growth opportunities within the company. The reality is that an external management provider can offer true data, business intelligence, and perspective on the trends with the tuition assistance policies. Because these providers think about tuition assistance 24 hours a day, they can really bring a lot of value to bridging the gap between the policy and the company's human capital objectives. So the major lesson learned is that it's important to first understand your corporate talent strategy, especially in regards to recruitment, development, retention, and succession planning, and then align the policy with that strategy. Northrop Grumman, for those who don't know, is a very large player in the global security field. They have over 70,000 employees and had 20 company mergers and acquisitions in recent years, which resulted in a very decentralized mix of tuition assistance programs with no consistency in policies and administrative procedures. In Northrop's interview with Bersin, they specifically mentioned that this caused significant employee morale problems. With the help of an external third-party tuition management provider, Northrop did navigate their tuition assistance program into something more harmonious and centralized. Now, I want to make sure we highlight an important distinction when it comes to the idea of centralizing your tuition assistance program. And remember, again, Brenda mentioned this as one of the attributes of level 2 in terms of the maturity model. So centralizing doesn't have to mean a one-size-fits-all type of policy that is so rigid that it doesn't work for your organization. In fact, many organizations very successfully have multiple policies within a centrally managed tuition program. For example, you could have a policy throughout a company where the maximum tuition cap for any employee is $5,000. However, a business unit that sees a real need to have more professional engineers could have a higher cap for that group while having a lower cap of, let's say, $2,000 for other degrees. Essentially, the policy is not exactly the same, but there are centralized parameters. For Northrop, they made great strides towards standardizing their tuition assistance policies. In administration, they can now derive the data through one source and report across all their sectors easily. This especially helped with improving consistency and enforcing company-wide compliance. However, their centralized program still allows for flexibility to meet the needs of their different business units. So remember, there is no one perfect tuition assistance policy solution out there. You will have to continue to fine-tune any tuition assistance program so you have the right policies in place that are appropriate to the overall company, but with room for flexibility for your business units. So that brings us to our next best practice: establish and maintain an agile program management approach. We had an interesting conversation with Sprint, which has a story that may sound familiar to many of you. Sprint has always made professional development a priority. However, the marketplace slowdown and financial crises of the mid-2000s led Sprint to make the real tough decision to suspend their tuition assistance program in early 2009. However, Sprint's HR leaders and tuition assistance program managers saw this as an opportunity to critically examine their tuition assistance program to revitalize and improve it to be more effective and agile. So when they were ready to relaunch, they had a plan that met the business needs. First, they instituted a philosophical change to the program's goals. The focus would be less on retention and instead focus more on commitment to employee career growth and encourage innovation. The leadership wanted to demonstrate their commitment and investment to each employee and to work to keep staff employable throughout any further economic turndown. They removed the 12-month retention clause, otherwise known as the stay clause. Brenda talked about this earlier. it was a negative experience for both Sprint and their employees. Generally, companies don't want to have to collect money from an employee who is leaving. Instead, Sprint simply added a 6-month waiting period for new hires to allow them to become settled into the new roles before looking into using the program. Next, they worked with third-party tuition management provider that offered education advising to employees to help them make more informed educational choices and build a solid long-term career path. Sprint has seen this advising benefit serve as a key tool in improving employee satisfaction, since it helps many employees stretch their dollars as well as dramatically improve time to completion. When Sprint leadership announced the formal reinstatement of their TAP program, the employee response was very positive. And since then, we've seen Sprint continue to improve their program by further aligning it with their L&D and forging articulation agreements with schools. Sprint's experience shows you just how important it is for companies to be willing to adjust goals to accommodate business conditions, become flexible, and solicit feedback to allow for real organizational improvements. The last case study I wanted to highlight presents a great strategy that not enough organizations are using. Here's a typical situation we see. You have 1,000 of your employees attending a school, and let's say your average spend is $2,000 per employee. That means you're spending $2 million going to that one school. This provides you with a lot of leverage with these schools to develop programs that meet your business needs. As long as they're mutually agreeable, schools are interested in reaching those kind of alliances with you. Cleveland Clinic is a great example of a hospital that's doing this for their 42,000 employees. They not only partner with an external tuition assistance program manager to gain access to special tuition savings and higher levels of service at schools, but they are currently working together to create a Cleveland Clinic preferred education network with their top 15 local schools. These strategic partnerships help Cleveland Clinic maximize their investment in their tuition assistance program. For example, schools are considering appointing a central point of contact for employee questions and concerns. Plus, they are considering conducting customized programs and joint research projects, along with developing documentation of grades and payments that meet Cleveland Clinic's compliance requirements, so employees can be reimbursed more easily. These are just a few creative examples of how you can help your employees complete degrees more quickly, establish an exchange of services to reduce overall cost, and ultimately encourage your employees to attend specific programs that will help contribute to your organization's future success. Partnering with education institutions, especially ones willing to work with you to develop a program that can directly help your employees, is an important way to improve your overall tuition assistance program. A third-party tuition assistance management partner that has strong relationships with educational institutions can be instrumental here in connecting your organization to high-quality universities and helping you stretch your dollars further. So one question we received is, how would you suggest forming partnerships with a college or university? The first thing you have to do is analyze all the data you have on your tuition assistance spend. So you need to go through and assess what schools do you spend the most money at. Then you need to assess, go back and talk to all of your business leaders and talk with them about whether or not they're getting the results from the spend that you're making. You know, are the employees coming away from those degrees or programs or certificates with the skills they're looking for? If they are not, it may be a good idea to go to those schools and talk to them about how they need to improve their program. If you are getting the results you want, then you might want to sit down with those schools and talk about how they can mutually change their program or assist you in providing better results for your employees. That's kind of the process that we would suggest in going and tackling this issue. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Brenda, and she is going to take us to a conclusion.
Thanks, Mark. Really interesting. You know, I mean, if we want to kind of look over this whole issue and why we're all on the phone today, we have a real educational challenge, particularly the U.S., but in China with younger workers and older workers taking their place, and with a generational gap, we have knowledge management issues. If we think about that whole broader climate that we're operating within, and as I mentioned in the intro, we really are dealing with serious talent shortfalls in certain areas, and it's about taking the people that were skilled in one area 30 years ago or 20 years ago, or maybe not skilled to the extent where they actually have expertise that can allow them to act on the job, and taking that raw talent and kind of moving them into a workforce that's going to supply a nation's economy with the talent that it needs. So this is part of a much broader issue about our post-secondary educational systems, about how they are aligned with what organizations need in terms of a workforce, and really this blurring of the line between graduation and workforce training. We're operating in kind of this margin where both post-secondary educational structures, whether supported by the government in certain socialized kinds of systems in Europe, or operating for-profit or non-profit as we do in the United States, taking that entire system and building a workforce that's going to meet the challenges that's facing the nations, especially if the nation's workforce challenges are reflective of a business challenge that's changing because the economy is changing, moving from a manufacturing to a service organization, or perhaps it's in a growing economy, or something has changed fundamentally in the way that nation is going to provide products and services to the rest of the world. So this is really kind of a cutting-edge area to be in right now, and it's really reflected in our research when organizations were telling us, we have to take this amount of money and align it to our business strategies. That's just a micro case of this kind of macro phenomenon that we're all witnessing. Tuition assistance is helping us build that strong foundation of talent. Organizations using tuition assistance strategically are controlling and owning the supply of certain skills. In a way, it's kind of cheating. You're growing your talent and keeping it through increased retention that tuition assistance ushers in. You think about it in terms of a competitive advantage, it's kind of a defensive maneuver. You're actually growing and keeping the talent that your competitors might get a hold of. So if you're in a labor market with a major competitor and you're competing for the same talent, that's actually, if you think about it as a business strategy, keeping the best talents from the other guy is a strategic move. Additionally, some organizations sponsor educational programs that work as feeder talent pools. So again, that's capturing that supply. And they're improving the talent in their applicant pools, making recruitment of hard-to-fill positions much easier and more effective. So not only are you in defensive maneuvers against your competitors in the war for talent, but you're also making your own processes more efficient, spending less money getting the talent in the door that you need. Utilizing tuition assistance en masse to develop employees to do critical jobs is also an efficient way to upskill a workforce. Organizations that customize college programs and negotiate lower tuition are making development of this workforce more efficient, like I just mentioned. Using tuition assistance in an efficient and effective way, targeting the hardest to hire skills most critical to business success, this automatically aligns the expenditure of tuition dollars with that organization's talent strategy. Now, this coupled with the fact that we know that HR reports higher retention as a byproduct of tuition assistance means that business is supported through a more stable and skilled workforce. Wendy, that's the end of the presentation portion of our time together. So at this point, Mark and I would be happy to take questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Brenda. Participants, you should see a webinar evaluation form on your screen. So if you could go ahead and fill that out while you're listening to Q&A, that would be great. We did already have some great questions come in, but if you still have questions, please feel free to enter them into that Q&A box you see on the left side of your screen. And I will go ahead and turn it back over to Brenda and Mark to answer some of your questions.
Thank you. I thought I'd jump in, answer a couple of these. So one question is, how do you know when your company is at the point to go to a third-party provider? So I don't think there is a right answer. We've had companies come to us to help them manage their tuition assistance program, whether they're at level 1, level 2, or even level 4. I think the bigger question is, why move to a tuition assistance management provider? And I think the answer there is around if you do truly want to have experts come in and help you align it to your company strategy, that would be the biggest reason. The other reason is that we can help you stretch your dollars further because of our advising services, our education network. Another question we received was, what if we do not already have a tuition assistance program in place and would like to develop relationships with local universities? You mentioned looking at our data, but we don't have any to go off yet. How would we determine which universities develop and which majors classes? Well, maybe if you don't have data, you might know where a lot of your students go to. I think you have more leverage with schools in being able to design a mutually beneficial program with them if you actually understand where they are going, how much you're spending there especially. And the other thing to think about is, what are the outcomes you're looking for? So what specific outcomes do you want from what degrees they're going or certificate programs they're going to pursue, and then aligning that with the universities or the academic institutions' programs.
You know, Mark, if I could just jump in.
Oh, please do.
Yeah, I think you know, also it's the data from the tuition assistance program would be one place, but there's also, you know, employee development data, talent management system data, or just even understanding, you know, if your organization's strategy is to, say, capitalize on a certain job that requires an engineering degree, you know, that's an automatic place where if that talent pool is for some reason threatened, or, you know, you're finding that talent scarce, so let's say a competitor moves into the neighborhood and all of a sudden that talent is hard to come by, that's where you're going to want to exercise control and focus on, you know, where you want to build these partnerships. So I do think that to some degree it reflects a larger HR strategy and an understanding of pivotal talent pools. Mark, do you want to continue with?
Sure. So we had another question. Where do most companies house their tuition assistance program? For example, we currently manage ours with the help of EdAssist and talent management. However, could it be managed in, say, benefits, but still be aligned to talent management strategy? I think this goes back to the whole issue around understanding what the company's human capital objectives are and understanding what outcomes they want from the tuition assistance program, and then putting it in the place that makes the most sense. We're very much advocates of having it in learning and development because it is a resource then for them to include with everything else they do to help employees develop. So that is something that we do talk about with companies. However, we think that is a company decision. It should be based on what the strategy is. It probably also has to do with where they are on the maturity model. I don't know if, Brenda, if you have a perspective on that, but I would think that would have something, a piece of the analysis to go by.
Yeah, I was thinking the last piece is really about benefits being aligned to talent management strategy. So if the benefits group is looking at the kinds of rewards and recognition that are going to motivate employees to perform, that are going to keep employees on the job, that are going to engage employees, then I think that if that's the flavor of your benefits department, then I think that absolutely it could be housed there, because tuition assistance does have to do so much with employee performance and with recognition and rewards. But I think that there is something to be said for the philosophical perspective that, you know, this is not just a benefit. This is a strategic tool, and that's how we're using it. Because when times are tight, cutting costs on benefits is one of the first places that executives are going to go. So depending on how, where your organization is in terms of fiscal health, might also drive, where you want to house tuition assistance programs. Wow, there's a lot of questions.
There are a lot of questions. One that popped up a couple times is all about what's happening with 127. So I'm sure, as all of you know, 127 is the law that kind of guides tuition assistance within companies, and it's up for renewal. In fact, it expires this year, December 31st. If you asked me the question a month ago, I would say that most likely it will get renewed, but given all of the discussion around the fiscal cliff, it's probably more likely that it will get renewed sometime early next year and then be retroed back. What we're doing right now is we're working with a DC law firm, a large DC law firm, and we're going to be posting a memorandum to our website by the end of the week or early next week that will outline exactly what employers and what we need to do around this issue of it getting renewed. We'll also be glad to send it out to all the participants on this call, but there are some options there given that 132, which is a fringe benefit law, which is similar. There are some ways of using that so that you continue to use your program for your employees. So there's more to come on that if you just keep an eye on our website, and we'll get the memo out to all of you.
Easy question. Michelle asks if the study included organizations outside the U.S., and it did. It's just that most of our panel is U.S.-based organizations. But that being said, of course, there are many distributed HR models where the HR might reside in a business unit that's housed outside of the U.S. So it's a simple demographic question like that in a survey is actually getting more and more difficult to answer. But I think it's a very relevant question, and Mark talked about it a little bit when we talked about centralization. These different countries obviously have different educational systems, and so it's important when thinking about the management of your tuition assistance program, how the reimbursement models, how the spend is going to interact with some of those educational systems. Question there.
Another question is, what services does EdAssist provide to companies seeking to have strategic alliances with schools? Is there an introduction process or resource tool that companies can use to reach their schools for alliance agreements? The service we provide is we have a network of schools that all of our members have access to, and usually those schools provide some kind of tuition reduction, special service, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, to the company employees or organization employees. That's the service we offer. And then what we generally do is when a client comes on board, we analyze their data. If they don't have data, we'll wait a few months or a quarter or a half a year until we have some good data. We'll see where their major spends are with the schools, and then we'll reach out to those schools and create an alliance based on the company's needs and what their human capital objectives are and their educational outcomes are. So that's the service we provide, and that's usually done on a fee-based arrangement.
All right, I'm going through these questions and trying to decide which to answer next. Let's see. Tricia asked, that I touched on the effects of occurring with the exit of the boomer professionals from the U.S. labor market into retirement on tuition assistance. Now, we're going to see more of a trickle of retirement than a mass exodus, I think, just due to the nature of the economy and our 401ks all needing a little bit of a love, I guess. But that being said, I mean, they do represent a large portion of the population. Now, millennials, or Gen Yers, are about 31 right now. The oldest are 31. The youngest are 9 years old. So we have about half of the generation in the labor market. Now, the difference between an employee who's 65 in knowledge and expertise and an employee who's 30 or younger is obviously broad. Now, that being said, there are enough people in management ranks, I looked at management rank numbers, to actually replace the boomers in management. Now, the question is, how do you get them, up to that kind of level of expertise? How do you give them that kind of education? And what I would recommend and how it's going to interact with some secondary institutions, there are a lot of executive management training courses, maybe something in between an MBA and a kind of more hands-on applied executive training course. If something like that could be built with through an educational partnership, you would have the opportunity to ramp up first-line managers on the job, using on the job experiences, which is what I think that these kind of greener employees are in need of. It's that raw experience in real world application, not so much the theories that they might be introduced to in an MBA or maybe coupled with those theories. So I think that that's one way to take a relatively green workforce and use tuition assistance and craft something that's going to basically onboard them more quickly, in light of the baby boomer retirement, so they can take over, and organizations aren't going to feel a lag in their management and leadership skills. So it's just one way that I can see that working.
There's one more here about an issue that most organizations are dealing with. So our company is geographically dispersed. How do you recommend we go about creating relationships with colleges and universities? Many courses programs need in-person hands-on instruction. I think it's a good question. Most companies are geographically dispersed these days. They have offices not only in the United States but across the world. I think the key again is to figure out what your goal is, what your human capital goal is first, and understand that, and then also understand where are your students currently going. Surprisingly, there are some common universities that many companies use, and a lot of them are the schools that are kind of leading edge in terms of online degree programs. So there is some commonality there. You'd be surprised. So understanding where your employees are currently going is very important. Understanding what goal you're trying to achieve is extremely important. And then reaching out to them and talking to them about how can they help you achieve the goals you're trying to get to. I don't think you need to worry if your top spend school is across the country because they have a terrific online program. They're still going to be willing to sit down with you and talk about how they can customize their program or even provide a special service or a special contact for your company. Again, it's going to come down to how much you spend there. And then there's another question here. What are some of the more progressive application of tuition assistance you've seen? Something more exciting and razzle-dazzle. I think part of the razzle-dazzle is just doing a very good job executing on your strategy. I think that would be considered razzle-dazzle, where when you get to the level 4 that Brenda went over, when you're truly creating alliances with schools, truly creating programs that are designed for your company, your goals. I think that's razzle-dazzle. Now, there are some unique programs we are seeing out there. So, for example, the most unique one that we've seen recently is where companies have repayment programs for student loans. So they're using their tuition assistance programs to pay back for student loans. Another one is where a company will fund, they'll allow an employee to use their tuition assistance to go get their MBA. And let's say the MBA costs $50,000. But their cap is $52.50 a year. They will pay that employee back $52.50 a year until they pay them back the $50,000. So those are kind of the unique situations we're seeing. But again, I would say the razzle-dazzle really comes down to executing your program really well.
Chris is asking about that alignment of talent management and TAP. How to do it. What are people doing to actually align talent management in their TAP? Is it process-driven? How is it enabled? And, Mark, certainly chime in here. But, I would say that this is like any learning and development initiative, in that, those aligning it with talent management strategies are primarily concerned with development and making sure development and more so than development of current employees. In addition to that, it relates to recruitment, recruiting those employees that are going to fill a development gap, a skill gap within the organization, as well as looking at, the kind of ancillary benefit of improving retention. And all of this, is with any talent management strategy, should be applied to those employees which are most pivotal to the organization strategy, like I mentioned before. So I honestly think it starts with the HR strategy. It starts with the business strategy, where it's going to go. It starts with the HR talent strategy, flowing from that, and then it's thrown in the mix of rewards, recognition, various engagement strategies and various learning and development strategies that are going to build the workforce that the organization needs. So I would have it all be part of that, certainly annual HR strategy conversation, but that may happen throughout the year as well.
I know we're coming up on our time. I just wanted to mention we're getting a lot of requests for the report and requests to have this webinar sent out. So we will send out an executive summary and this webinar to all the participants on this call over the next 2 days or so.
With that, Wendy, I think that we can probably wrap this up. We do have other questions here, quite a few actually. And maybe, Mark, between the two of us, maybe we can get back to folks and supply them with an answer offline. How about that?
Good idea. Thanks, Brenda.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you, Brenda and Mark. I see a lot of them coming in, and some of them overlap, so I think we may have gotten to most of them. But, yes, we will certainly make sure someone gets back to you with the ones that were not answered. And as Mark said, they will be sending that. EdAssist will be sending the replay and the deck to you within the next few days. You can always contact info@bersin.com if you have any further questions. You'll see Mark and Brenda's email address up there as well. You can reach out to them. Also, if you are a Fortune 1000 or Global 2000 organization and would like some more information about the Bersin Associates What Works membership, you can type yes in that box down there on the left, and we will get back to you with more information on that as well. And again, we thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today and all the great questions. We really value the participation. It was really great to see so many questions come in. So again, we thank everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Brenda and Mark, for the great presentation. Thank you. And
thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Brenda.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye now. Have a great day.
Thank you. This does conclude today's webinar, and have a nice afternoon. Thank you.